The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has clarified that the utilization of generative AI does not make you ineligible for an Oscar. The Washington Post entered a strategic partnership with OpenAI to integrate its journalism into ChatGPT.
Can AI support bot accidentally rewrite company policy?
Microsoft has unveiled a major redesign of its Microsoft 365 Copilot app. Nvidia launching its Nemo microservices suite.
Can AI uncover resources hiding in plain sight?
OpenAI upgraded their image generation model and the API GPT Image 1 is now available on APIs. OpenAI has started rolling out a lightweight version of its deep research products.
What about using AI to write regulation and law? The United Arab Emirates is doing just that.
Perplexity AI launched their Perplexity Assistant on iOS. Apple removed their Available Now label from Apple Intelligence's website.
Anthropic's Claude has attempted to count its values, and the answer there is 3,307.
Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in the world of artificial intelligence. How you doing, Annie?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I got a strange question to kick us off. Have you ever run a marathon?
In fact, I have. I have run 2 marathons.
2 marathon?
2 marathons. Yeah, not my
First one didn't scare you off. It would scare me off. I never run one.
the first one it was such a debacle that I was like, I need to do better than that. So that's why I had to go run a second one.
Well, I asked because I don't know if you saw, but in Beijing, they had what is billed as the world's first humanoid robot half marathon race between humans and robots. Did you see this?
I did not see this, but I can certainly guarantee you the robots would have beat me in the marathon.
I mean, it didn't break any world records. You know, it was not super fast. I think they had a big robot, they had a little robot that ran it, but they're like humanoid robots out there with the bib and running. It had been separate lanes, so there wasn't any colliding with the humans. But what a day to live in, where robots are racing in marathons in Beijing.
That's hilarious, and also probably very humbling for the human racers. There's lots of humbling experiences that happen to you in a marathon. I remember when I was getting towards the end of the first one I ran, and just about to enter the phase where I thought I was like 90% chance of dying before I got to the end. And this dude runs past me with bare feet dribbling a basketball. He had run the entire marathon bare feet dribbling a basketball. And I was like, well, that's humbling. He looks like he's just living his best life, and I'm over here contemplating whether I'm going to die before I reach the finish line.
So I've not run a marathon, anybody. I did run a triathlon, and I had my own
That's
humbling
even
moment.
worse.
Yeah, it's not like an Ironman, right? It's an
Oh,
Olympic, so it was only like, 10K or whatever.
yeah.
But they write your age in grease pencil. I was a biker, and so we're prone to biking too fast and having no gas in the tank for running, which happened. So I'm like jogging, and they write your age on the back of your calf. And so these ladies with 7 something, I couldn't read all, but like 7-year-old ladies were sprinting past me, and I went, "Oh God, I did not train properly for this."
Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely humbling. Although I think if you were running faster than the robot, that might really pump you up. They maybe should consider putting robots in marathons just for morale boosters so that people can beat them and
Well,
feel
pace
really
car.
good about themselves. Yeah,
Yeah, I like
exactly.
it. I
Yeah,
like it.
make them the pacers. Well, Jeff, let's move on to our AI radar segment. This segment, we break down the biggest headlines and updates from the world's leading AI players. Think of it as your quick fire pulse check on what's hot in AI this week. What do you got for us?
I got so much stuff this week. I hope we get through it all. But we'll start off with a recurring theme here. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has clarified that the utilization of generative AI does not make you ineligible for an Oscar. So Gen AI coming to the Oscars. But the Academy did emphasize that the extent of human creativity and authorship would be a key factor in evaluating actual winners for the Oscars. So the Gen AI coming to the Oscars.
Well, what's your over under connecting it to our marathon story? What's your over under on when we see a humanoid robot accepted speech at the Oscars?
I think it's much
What
closer
year?
now that you've mentioned it.
Yes, exactly. What year will we see that? And will they cry? And will they be able to stay on time with the cutoff of the music and everything?
Yeah, they'll definitely be programmed to not stay on time with the cutoff of the music just for kicks. I would guess maybe like an AI video generated acceptance speech before the humanoid robot, but I'd give it a couple of years, maybe 5 years. I would put my over under at 5 years for some sort of AI generated acceptance, whether robot or or video.
All right, well, we'll see if you're right.
Yeah, if we're still here in 5 years. All right, next up, the Washington Post entered a strategic partnership with OpenAI to integrate its journalism into ChatGPT. So users asking ChatGPT questions about the news will now receive summaries, quotes, and links directly back to Washington Post articles. So this was really interesting. OpenAI kind of in a fight with a lot of publishers who think they're stealing data to train models and then making deals with other publishers who want to have authoritative news sources showing up in ChatGPT queries. I thought this was fascinating on both sides. OpenAI's decision to engage in the Washington Post too.
Yeah, I was interested in this too. I wonder how the economics are working. Right now, everything in Washington Post is generally behind a paywall, and so now this, of course, gets around the paywall. So how are they getting compensated for that, or have they just decided it's another
Or is it
distribution
lead gen
channel?
for
Who
them where
cares?
you
Yeah,
get a summary and you see that you wanna read the whole article, pay money. I mean, I have a subscription to the Washington Post because I run into the paywall a bunch on articles I wanna read, and, so maybe this is leaning into that. It'll be really this moment for the companies that people find information through and the companies who are producing said information, to change the nature of the agreement. It used to be everything came through Google, and then and Washington Post had to negotiate with Google. There was a certain deal that maybe they don't like, but it's just kind of how it evolved. And they've got this moment to rethink it with new technologies emerging. So it'll be fascinating to see how those, not just partnerships, but then the economics of those play out.
yeah, very interesting.
All right, next up, Microsoft has unveiled a major redesign of its Microsoft 365 Copilot app. It's actually a good name. I like Copilot. They're integrating more advanced AI features into their business productivity suite, of course, as we knew they would do. They've got more AI powered search capabilities, extending into third parties like Slack, Google Drive, Jira, a new create function powered by OpenAI's GPT-4o model to generate multimedia content inside Office Docs. You need to put no more clip art from Clippy in your Word docs. Now you can just generate the AI art, which we'll start to be able to identify too. And they also added a new app called Notebooks, which is a project-based tool to organize and contextualize data for specific tasks. So kind of like your a collaborative workspace, I guess, for different projects you're working on. So a lot of stuff in here, and interesting to see them both productizing a lot of this, but also using third-party apps, GPT-4o for image generation. I mean, kind of leaning into being the user entry point for a bunch of different capabilities and integrating data platforms like Slack or Google Drive into your third-party model. Really interesting space for Microsoft.
Yeah, very interesting, and also interesting to see specifically the sort of Google integration. I've talked before about how Copilot is really, leaning into making the Microsoft workspaces look a lot more attractive in the workplace. When is Google going to catch up? Well, maybe they're not. Maybe they're just going to get integrated into some of these things that Microsoft is doing. I don't know.
I don't know. Now Microsoft and Claude have better Google Drive integration than Gemini. Like that doesn't feel like a good place to me to be Google. So I feel bad always bagging on my old Google colleagues, but there it is.
It's funny, this week I was in the office and one of our your former coworkers, my current coworker said, "How come you and Jeff always like to have a recurring theme of bagging on Google?"
We just speak the truth as we see it. And Google, you're welcome to prove me wrong and launch some awesome products. I know a few of the product managers working on AI there, so like I'd love to be singing Google's praises, but right, they got to earn it. That's all
Gotta
I'm
earn
gonna
it.
say. Got to earn it.
Okay.
All right. Well, Nvidia is out this week launching its Nemo microservices suite, enabling enterprises to rapidly develop and deploy AI agents that function as digital teammates. Interesting. So, kind of an agent framework. They've got Nemo Customizer, Nemo Evaluator, and guardrails. And these are kind of AI agents that are continuously learning and improving based on the data you give them and the way you work with them. And again, interestingly, they work with a broader range of models from Llama to Mistral to Google's Gemma models, and integration into some of the kind of agentic platforms like Longchain and Llama Index. So really seeing NVIDIA just going, hey, we want to build complex agents on top of these models. Like we're just going to let you do that here and our services. But so fascinating because they're not really an enterprise company in the way Microsoft is. They're a hardware company, but out there, you delivering the software that will drive more demand for hardware, I guess.
Yeah, I know this was very different NVIDIA news than we've seen in other weeks, to your point, but I guess you're right there. This is a driving demand, play for them.
Yeah, well, and a lot of their mode has been in the CUDA, in the software layer that they developed on top of their hardware platform that allows things to run better on NVIDIA hardware than anywhere else, easier to develop. So again, if they're building these frameworks and going, hey, there's this awesome framework, but you really got to have an NVIDIA chip if you want to run it. To me, that's just a very smart way to entrench their dominance in the space of running the actual hardware.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, we talked a lot about image generation models this week. OpenAI upgraded their image generation model, and the API GPT Image One is now available on API. So just wait for all your Studio Ghibli-ified artwork coming to third-party apps like Figma and Adobe, who have actually integrated some of this into their own creative suites and products. So really interesting to see this getting out there. And it'll be really interesting to see if we get from people playing with image creation in ChatGPT to seeing really different use cases as it's API enabled and now being embedded into, as Microsoft did with the GPT 4.0, but embedding these into end user applications.
Yeah, and also just, I feel like it was just a couple weeks ago that we were talking about the major upgrade moving off of DALL-E into, their next gen, and now they have a next gen, video or image generation, so they're moving quickly on this.
They are. One more area they're moving quickly. This is a real tip for any of the Chat GPT free users in the audience. Listen up. OpenAI has started rolling out a lightweight version of its deep research products. This was the product originally based on O1 and then O3 that would do a lot of web search and produce like 10-page reports on topics. They've got one now powered by O4 Mini, so a slightly smaller model. It gives slightly shorter answers, which as a user, I got to say, I honestly prefer a lot of the time. I don't need 15 pages. I want the one pager. And that is rolling out now for ChatGPT for users. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the deep research and send it off to look at whatever area you'd like a 5 to 10 page report on, go check it out. It's a very cool capability.
It is cool. I love that capability.
All right, we're going to move on now to getting a little Apple in the news. Perplexity AI is deciding that Siri is not good enough. Which to be fair, Siri not really good enough. I'm not impressed by Siri. So to compete with Siri, they have launched their Perplexity Assistant on iOS. This has been available on Android for a little while, but essentially a Siri-like assistant that can not only answer questions the way Perplexity normally would, but interact with other apps on the platform. So sending emails, setting reminders. They show booking dinner reservations or cars. Interestingly, this doesn't work quite as well as in Android, where they have deeper level system access at the OS. And so, kind of when you want to book a table, it really just opens up like Open Table and finds the restaurant for you, but it doesn't complete the action, which I think is really a limit of what iOS allows them to do. But really interesting to see them releasing something that's essentially a Siri replacement for iOS devices because Siri is just not really keeping up with the times.
Yeah, I have not actually heard a lot of buzz out there about this feature from Android users. Like, do people like it? Does it work well? Is it truly a lot better than Siri? This, announcements this week make it sound like it's significantly better, but are people actually using it? I guess is my question. And it'll be interesting to see if people will actually go out of their way to use it on their iPhone when Siri is just embedded and comes with the.
I've played with it, but if not, it just not being the Hey Siri, I'm on my to my phone. Activation, the real time makes it a little bit less useful. You can do that. You can actually set the default in Android, so a little more easy to get on top of. And my Android friends have not talked about it a lot, so I don't know if it's gotten a lot of adoption, but it hopefully can at least push the state of the art forward on what these assistants are able to do to really use your phone for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of how bad Apple has been in this space, they have now removed their available now label from Apple Intelligence's website following a recommendation for the National Advertising Division, which found it was misleading given that you couldn't really access a lot of the Apple Intelligence features on a lot of the phones, and some of them don't actually work at all. So I just like we know they delayed and upgraded Siri for maybe years, and now they're having to remove the Apple Intelligence available now moniker. It just feels like bad news after bad news for Apple.
It does, and, the fact that they removed it makes it seem like they sort of conceded the point that a lot of the functionality isn't maybe working as because it is available. Whether or not it's actually working or intelligent is maybe a different question, but yeah, I was surprised they sort of conceded the point on that.
Yeah, it sounds like they disputed the perspective that they were given, but decided it was not worth the increased liability for, false advertising issues to leave it up. So
Fair enough.
they gave it away.
The integration, I don't know, I finally upgraded to the iPhone 16, which I expected to have much more, integration, but they still, they suffer from the same sort of integration problems as Google, where, like, if your phone is locked and you ask Siri, like, "Who is the actress in some movie?" obscure thing, she'll know the answer to that. But if you ask her the next appointment on your calendar, she's like, "No, I can't tell you that. You have to unlock your iPhone." And that, like, ability, I'm like, "You can't tell me what's coming up in my day, but you can tell me this other thing," just is very weird to me.
It is a strange state, and the question of whether AirPods, glasses, I've got the Meta glasses that I play with on occasion, like whether or not those things are going to be permanently on form factors in some way that makes them more useful in that way, the watch, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see. But it is always frustrating when you ask a question. It's like, yeah, just can you unlock your phone? Like, I'm in the car. The whole reason I'm asking you via voice is because I'm not available to pick up my phone and look at it. Please help me out. And they really can't do it.
Exactly.
Well, our last AI radar story is a little different than normal, but there's a new paper entitled "Welcome to the Era of Experience," released by Google DeepMind researchers David Silver and Richard Sutton. Richard Sutton's sort of famous for his original essay, the Bitter Lesson, which is kind of one of the most famous lessons about or essays about how AI will develop. It's turned out to be highly prescient. And this new article kind of arguing that we're going to shift into a new era of AI where the AIs will be optimized for real world outcomes that they can measure as opposed to human defined outcomes. And really, like all the internet text that they're trained on is a human generated what the right answer is. It's the internet text or the internet video or whatever. Here they're going, hey, if you want an AI to help you with your health, maybe it should just be able to measure your vitals and see your information and look at what's really going on in the world. So really interesting perspective that AI training will shift from where it has been to looking at optimizing a whole different data set that's integrated into the real world. I thought it was a really it's very buzzy right now in the AI circles. A lot of people talking about this concept, but really interesting piece.
Yeah, it is an interesting piece. This almost I like debated if it's a radar piece or an alignment piece, but this
I did
idea
too.
that um an AI, it's trained on everything humans know and now it's going to surpass us feels very counter to how I think of the future of AI being like AI can master everything we already know and then it's going to be up to humans to access the other 90% of our brain and unlock new things. But this kind of says the opposite.
It's also kind of a throwback to pre-LLM era AI. If we think about AlphaGo, one of the key insights in AlphaGo was that we didn't like train it how to play Go. We let it play a whole bunch of Go and learned what good playing looked like, including in the game where it beat Lee Sedol, making a move that no human had ever contemplated or which is outside. Everybody was kind of stunned by the decision it made. So it kind of found a new net through the world strategy. And I think that kind of disappeared when we went to these LLMs and transformers and using text and video that existed to train them. But the idea, and of course, there it was artificial. It wasn't like the real world. It was playing itself in all these games. But it was really learning from a grounding of real experience and what worked and didn't work in a more practical way. And so I think the authors argue that we're kind of going back to where we started, learning from what really works and doesn't work, as opposed to what you're told works or doesn't work. And that's ultimately going to be the next thing that comes after LLMs to take us. And if you think about all the things we talk about in education, in science, in medicine, like where do breakthroughs come from? You don't need what people think works. You need what actually works. What does the physics do? How did the biology work? And so that grounding could be really transformational, I think, in the scientific arenas.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I'm gonna move on to AI in the wild and zoom in on how AI is being used out there in the real world by companies, communities, and creators. We'll explore a couple practical, surprising, and perhaps even wild use cases. Annie, what do you got for us for AI in the wild this week?
Well, Jeff, can an AI support bot, accidentally rewrite company policy? That is the unfortunate situation that Cursor has found itself in this week. So, what actually happened was that Cursor has a frontline bot named Sam. And when he was answering questions for a consumer of the product, he told them that they no longer can be logged in on two devices at the same time. So this was a developer. They were logged in on one laptop working on something. They went to try to go log in on another laptop, hoping to be able to sort of have both open at the same time. And they got automatically logged out of their first instance, which of course is not functional for developers who are often logged in and have multiple irons in the fire as they're going. And so this person got upset. They wrote into the chat bot. They chatted with Sam, who told them this is our new company policy that we've implemented for security reasons. And so the lesson for business, this consumer got very upset, or the user got very upset.
Really
They
took
took
off on Reddit.
I was
There was a
they
lot of very angry people about this.
That's right. They took to Reddit. They posted on Reddit that this is the new policy. And all of the customers, so much backlash. I'm deleting Cursor. I'm no longer going to subscribe. This is ridiculous and outrageous. And actually, it turns out it was a totally hallucinated policy that Sam the bot had made up, which actually goes to show you a couple of things. One, how important it is to have a human in the loop at reviewing the things your chatbot is saying, but then also how high stakes it is when your chatbot gets it wrong and how quickly it can cause kind of
Mm.
customer outrage, and that can spread like wildfire, especially in the era of Reddit. So this is a fascinating one.
It was, and it's such a great reminder of how LLMs really work because it's not like it was, like, maliciously making something up, and what it made up sounds reasonable because many companies do have this policy, and it's in the chain. There's lots of policies that go, "Yeah, you can only access this software you bought from me was a single device license." That's a common thing for a way, companies restrict make you pay for multiple devices to have the so it was like it didn't just make it up out of whole cloth, it kind of just read the wrong details. It made up a plausible sounding answer that was very reasonable, just happened to be, wrong
Yeah,
in
it just happened to
particulars.
be wrong. It's funny because, this is something that I think a lot of companies are wrestling with is how much do you trust the AI to just deploy it versus having what we call a human in the loop. And then the question when you have a human in the loop is what humans, right? Who do you hire to oversee the AI? And would that be the same person that you would have hired to be your customer support type of agent? But, we talked before a couple weeks ago about something that went wrong with Air Canada on this sort of front. The other really interesting one I heard about this week, because I started sort of doing more research after reading about Cursor, was there was one at a car dealership. I don't know if you saw this, but this was actually like an intentional jailbreak where the person basically got the chatbot at the car dealership to tell them that they would sell them a Corvette for $1 and that this conversation was a legally binding contract. So the chat actually told them, yes, you can come buy this Corvette for $1 and this is a legally binding contract. The person, printed it out, brought it into the dealership and said, "I would like my Corvette for $1. I have this legally binding contract from your chatbot," which is, of course, hilarious and outrageous, but that's the type of stuff that I think companies have to think about how they're gonna control for, in this new chatbot era.
Yeah, it is true, and not just one of the concepts I think a lot of companies are gonna have to get a little better at for this is the kinda red teaming, most of the times when you walk through these, you walk through the use cases of what you want the user to do, and they ask the question and you get the answer, you go, "Oh, look how wonderfully it works for all of our use cases," but then there are the malicious users who are out there trying to take advantage of this automated system to get it to do something silly, and oftentimes in our QA processes, we don't think about that, and so the AI companies and tech companies in general use what they call red teaming, just kinda having a group whose job is to pretend to be the bad actor taking advantage of the system and poke and prod at the limits. And it's kind of counterintuitive for most product managers or, team leads who are just trying to make it work for the intended use case. And a good reminder that sometimes you need to think about the malicious user too, and how are they going to try and take advantage of it, and what are your guardrails for that?
100%. I think this is an area where we can see AI supporting our safe rollout of AI, right? Because we've talked about using AI with different personas to test different conversation types and all this type of stuff, but you can use AI as your red team to go and, try to break new chatbot, give it 18 different personas with people from different backgrounds, including, a fraudster and a bad actor and maybe someone who just doesn't understand your space at all, and then somebody who's an expert and all of the different sort of backgrounds and try to go and interact with that and see what happens. And I think that that's going to be a really important kind of muscle for people to build because you're right. Usually we just make sure it works the way we think it's going to work and we don't think about all the edge cases until we see it live in the wild.
Absolutely.
Okay, I got another live in the wild one for you. Can AI uncover resources hiding in plain sight? Earth AI has successfully used artificial intelligence to uncover valuable mineral deposits in Australia that traditional exploration methods previously overlooked. So, this was a super interesting one. When I first read about it, I thought it was going to have something to do with Minecraft, but it's literally actual minerals and actual mining. And apparently, so in Australia, they will lease out, pockets of their land for a 6 year, time horizon for someone to come and try to mine. And it's an incredibly inefficient process for people because then they have to go poke around and try to figure out where in the land these minerals might be located, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. And obviously 6 years is a really long period of time to be sort of searching around for these things. Well, Earth AI has developed this model specifically to sort of analyze the geography and to be able to pinpoint where the minerals might actually be found. And one thing that was funny about this story is when this model was first developed, the person said, "I have this model, it's available." A lot of the mining companies, which are essentially, I didn't know this, but apparently very old school, said, "No, no, no, no way your AI works better than our humans. Our humans are way better." So Earth AI said, "Okay, well, we're actually going to go and like get the resources to go do some drilling in these places so that we can see if we're right or not." And lo and behold, they were right. So Here you go.
I love this story because it's just so real world, and I think my kids would be very disappointed that it was real minerals and not Minecraft minerals. And much more exciting to be in Minecraft. It's got to be some equivalent to Minecraft, but it's kind of like valuable resources hiding in plain sight. The belief that an expert especially because I imagine there's some explainability of this. And I go, "Oh, why do you think it's there?" Well, the model says it's going to be there, and go, it's like Moneyball, right? It's like it's not how we choose baseball players. And so it's just a great idea. And I think a good reminder for everybody to think like, where are the sources of resource, the data, the items that you have in your company that are valuable but underutilized, and you just haven't thought about in a while because the whole, how do we take advantage of that? And the answer might be that, things that were impractical to take advantage of before are no longer so when you can apply AI to the problem.
Yeah, I always tell people that their biggest treasure trove of unstructured data is in their call recordings and sort of email interactions with customers, which before were very hard to actually translate into any sort of usable data that you could query off of. But now with LLMs, you can. And so that's something that I'm hoping that every company is thinking about exploring, because that is all of your customer feedback is right there. It's just unstructured. And now you can parse it in a way that you never could before.
Well, it makes you start to wonder if we're not recording all of our calls, because what were we going to do with the recordings anyway? Now you're going, oh, maybe we should be, because now I can, back to the question, what'd you do if you had unlimited interns? I'd have them listen to all the calls and tell me what my biggest five complaints from my customers were.
That's right.
You can do that now in a matter of seconds. All right, let's wrap things up with our AI alignment segment where we get philosophical and occasionally political. We'll unpack the latest debates, policies, and ethical dilemmas shaping the path to a safer and smarter AI future. Annie, what do we have in AI alignment this week?
I got some fascinating stories for you, Jeff. So, first of all, we have been talking a lot about writing regulation to oversee AI. But what about using AI to write regulation and law? The United Arab Emirates is doing just that. So, they have announced a groundbreaking move to actually integrate AI directly into their legislative process, marking the first national effort to formally leverage AI in drafting, reviewing, and updating laws. This is expected to dramatically reduce development time for the laws by up to 70%. So if we were doing this in the United States, 70% of the time would be like years or decades, right? Of how long it takes us to actually get a law
Law
passed.
is passed here, yeah.
So this is super interesting. And of course, as with anything, there's some haters who are like, oh, there's a lot of risk here. Of course, there's going to be humans reviewing these laws before they're actually passed. But I think it's actually pretty genius to use AI to get that V1 out the door, especially in a place like United Arab Emirates, where the vast majority of the people there speak different languages. Right? It's such a melting pot of a place. So actually writing laws that you can translate them into multiple languages and all this type of stuff to make them actionable and useful for people. I think this is fantastic.
It's fascinating. I've always thought of LLMs to interpret what the heck the US legislators actually wrote, because that language is not written for humans to read. Maybe an LLM is better at it than I am. But this was fascinating. I've always wondered, this is my idea for any regulators or legislators who listen to this podcast, but I always thought it'd be really interesting to get AIs thinking about unintended consequences, outcomes, potential negative side, like to really analyzing the likelihood of success of policy. And I think one of the biggest, often forgotten things in policy, like is a policy achieving its objectives or not? Like we often pass laws with the goal of reducing X or increasing Y, and then no impact on X and Y at all, or the opposite impact. And oftentimes it's unintended side effects that seem to outweigh the benefits that you are purport. And I feel like AI's ability to actually help you think through these things and improve the legislating process or the regulating process, I think is very real. It's a little different than what the UAE is doing. But would love to see more government leaning into using AI to make better decisions and better policies.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, I always, when I'm kind of doing my new hire orientation and kind of training people on the sort of space, I always tell them that laws are written at a very sort of like philosophical level, because it takes us so darn long to pass them that they need to be on the books for decades, if not centuries. And you can imagine a world in the future where maybe that bar is not as high, right? Because you actually can be more nimble, you can get things across the line faster, you can get faster to the debate part and not so much squabbling on the syntax and specific, which word you're going to use, etc. Would be pretty nice. I don't have high hopes for the United States on being able to follow in this footsteps, but I'm glad somebody's doing it.
We're going to make the case for it here, even if we don't have high hopes that it could. No, we're not going to take an over under on that one, huh?
Well, I mean, we could take an over under, it would just be kind of long. So Not gonna lie. All right, and, you started with an interesting question. I'm gonna end, this week with an interesting question. How many values do you have, Jeff?
I don't know that I've ever enumerated them, though I sometimes think about trying for the sake of trying to pass them along to my children, but I don't know that I've enumerated them. How many do you have?
I've never enumerated mine either, but I think if I was going to, I would probably be able to count them on a couple of hands, like, they would be pretty high level, but it turns out Anthropic's Claude has attempted to count its values, and the answer there is 3,307 values, enumerated by Claude, so my over/under on that was gonna be way off, but
I don't think I could name 3,307 values, whether I shared them or not.
I know, but they really grouped them into 5 key categories, which maybe would be more similar to the ones that you and I would have come up with, which are basically practical, which is like values around helpfulness and efficiency, knowledge related, things about accuracy, clarity, social values, things like politeness, empathy, protective values, safety, ethics, and so on and so forth, and then personal values like autonomy and emotional support. And so this is a sort of interesting take that Anthropic and but Claude is doing to basically try to teach Claude how to be a good citizen and how to a good AI citizen and try to sort of encode into it what it thinks are important values for the AI to actually have so that as it interacts with people, it can be, a responsible member of society, even if it's a virtual society. So it's very interesting.
Anthropic seems to be doing a lot of work. I think Dario Amodei sometimes refers to it as an MRI for the AI brain, but trying to look inside. And I think their work is fascinating that they've done a lot of this. Like they did some work on the labor impacts of AI by looking at what are the real queries and how do they fall into the kinds of tasks that fall into different kinds of jobs. And so this looking at how people are really using Claude to understand and how Claude is responding to understand what kind of values it is expressing. And then of course the second question, how do you if you want to shift what those values are, how do you do that? Because some of these are really emergent properties. So they kind of Dario also sometimes describes LLMs as being grown versus built. Like you kind of like you don't really know how like when you grow a plant, you like water, you give it a bunch of stuff that you know it needs, but then you don't really know how it does the thing. And the LLMs are a bit that way. And so figuring out how you can grow different kinds of personalities or values into it is a really interesting question. So fascinating to see Anthropic really investing in understanding what Claude is doing on a certain level and how it's being used, and then how you can actually influence those kind of values that it expresses. This is maybe the other over under. Are you optimistic that others will follow the lead? Dario's got a very strong perspective on Anthropic about safe AI, but I also always wonder if the incentives are there for the other large developers, the OpenAIs, the Googles, the Metas to follow down that footsteps? Or is it like that's just wasted effort that's not getting you to the next model that's even better or better user facing features? So, what's your optimism that the broader set of foundational model developers invest enough in this space? Dario thinks they're not. What do you think?
It seems hard to me to actually make I mean, I applaud them for doing it, but it seems like a very hard thing to actually do because values are so human specific and trying to figure out of those 3,307 values that they've identified, what is the right spot on the spectrum to be if you were creating like the perfect human or the perfect AI seems like there would be a lot of space for debate in that conversation. And so I can't see there being a ton of companies that are like, yeah, I want to engage in that debate. That's where I want to be spending my time because it just seems like an incredibly complex and challenging question that no matter what, you're going to pick somewhere on the spectrum that's going to make a small percentage of people really happy and a large percentage of people annoyed, right? And so
Yeah.
that's hard.
And even if you do it, I can imagine there being a lot of incentives to keep it under the covers. Like not telling you the values we're trying to teach our bot, but we want it to like people to like it better. We want people to use it more. And so we do some of this work in order to achieve that outcome. But whether we want to have a debate about the kinds of values it expresses and whether those are the right or the wrong ones, that's a sticky debate. It's a sticky debate in just one country here in the United States, but then you take it to a global context and it gets way, way stickier for any company to try and navigate. I wouldn't want to be the comms person trying to explain why I imbued an AI with particular values versus others for some of these global companies. That would be a hard gig.
I think that's right. I mean, your religion affects your values and your culture affects your value, your, country of origin affects your values. I have an employee who, was born and raised in another country and then immigrated to the United States about 15 years ago. And I love conversing with them because they're very direct. And I always say, I just appreciate how direct you are. And one time they said, well, English is my second language, and I just don't know enough words to put things as fluffy as you guys all put it when you tell each other things. You guys just you caveat everything and you're so delicate, and I just don't have enough English words to do that. So I just say what I'm thinking. And I thought a lot of people would be more effective if they took that approach.
We should all work in a country where our natural language is not the primary language. We all speak a second language at work, so we're all forced to be a little more just blunt. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's it for this week in What the AI. We'll be back next week with more insights, breakdowns, and WTF moments from the world of AI. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and share with anyone who's trying to make smarter decisions in the age of AI. Annie, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover What the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email@whattheai.fm. We really do read every message, and we do our best to cover them all on the show.